Good morning and welcome everybody to the first in our series, Great Minds Think Alike. In this session, we will be discussing how safe miners keep mines alive. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend this event. We believe this is quite a critical topic, given that miners themselves are the lifeblood of mines, as well as the fact that mining companies represent a good deal of the lifeblood of our economies, given that mining has a 10 times downstream multiplier effect. I'm very pleased to see we have a very diverse audience here. We have companies from South Africa and throughout Africa, including the Mandela Mining Precinct, Anglo, Exxaro, Tronox, Sibanye-Stillwater, and as well as people from as far as Australia, India, and Kosovo. So welcome everybody. Again, thank you for your time. We do want you to participate. So on your right-hand side, you'll see we will be putting up polls throughout the presentations. Please do participate, and you're more than welcome to ask questions as we go along, and we will endeavour to answer as many of them as possible during today's presentation. And should we run out of time, we will answer your questions offline in individual emails. I'm going to hand over to our program presenter, our program director, Dilly Naidu. Dilly is the CEO of Madala and Associates. He has over 45 years of international business experience as a business strategist, coach, and mentor. Dilly is a multi-ultra marathon runner, nature lover, and social golfer. Dilly, over to you.
Thank you, Caroline. And may I extend my welcome to all of you that's joining us from many parts of the world. As Caroline mentioned, this is a very, very important session. This is about the lives of people, and especially miners' lives. We have an excellent lineup of speakers this morning. I have a very simple role, and I'm going to be your program director this morning. So Caroline has touched a little bit about my background, but I am passionate about the mining sector. Mining is what made South Africa. So we should be refocusing and taking our deserved spot of being number one in the world. And this is something we are doing with a number of partners that we have, including key customers. So with that, I would like to share with you, before we get into the presenters, a very quick high-level snapshot of the mining sector in South Africa. So if we look at from a policy perspective, we've had some challenges from the government side in terms of policy uncertainty. So that has not attracted too many investments from international players in the local mining sector. However, the good news is that we are on an upward trajectory with more trends towards certainty around policies in mining. And what we're seeing in the meantime is that a number of our mining companies are looking inwards and are starting to build their operations and optimize their operations. From a shareholder perspective, there's been some excellent dividends. Despite COVID, the mining sector is probably one of the sectors is a bit of the darling at the moment as far as return on investment from a shareholder perspective. You will notice the icons I've selected is platinum and gold. And the platinum group metal sector has been one of the biggest revenue generators. And it's amazing, although it is claimed that South Africa has almost the next 300 years supply of coal, it's actually outperformed coal as far as revenue generation is concerned. Some key highlights, the PGM basket price had about a 37% increase, and gold has had a 27% increase. You know, gold is just under $2,000 a barrel. On the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the mining sector has outperformed all other sectors, including its international peers in the mining sector globally. Some of the future trends that I'm watching is the hydrogen environment, and huge opportunities is seen for the platinum sector in terms of fuel cells and batteries. As an example, for every battery fuel cell, there's about an equivalent of 1 ounce of platinum. So in trucks where you have 2 batteries, you'll have about 2 ounces of platinum. So that is very, very interesting. I want to now move on to the employee side and touch a little bit on the size of the mining sector. There's approximately 455,000 employees in the sector. Since we've moved to level 1 COVID, there's about 350 employees that are back at work. A number of the office workers are still working remotely. There's been approximately 17,000 COVID-19 cases, and unfortunately, there's been 190 deaths. What we've seen is innovation with the mining companies as far as creating applications for screening of COVID. And one of our presenters will be touching later on of integrating that into the permit to work system. Some of the health issues, as most of you are aware, have been in the mining sector, includes the challenges of TB, HIV/AIDS, hypertension. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is joining us all the way from Durban in KwaZulu-Natal. Scott Brennan is a divisional executive at Adapt IT. Scott has had over 20 some odd years of experience in the industrial sector. He started off as a software developer, but over several years have traveled extensively across Africa, Middle East, Australasia, and has worked with some of the largest industrial and mining companies. In his personal time, Scott is a great artist, and I've seen his paintings, all paintings of landscape, which is actually being exhibited at a gallery in Durban at the moment. So with that, I hand you over to Scott.
Thank you very much, Dilly. So I think that video conferencing is a fantastic example of what William Gibson was talking about when he coined the phrase, "The future has arrived, it's just not evenly distributed yet." It's hard to believe that it was in 1956, 64 years ago, that AT&T created the first picture phone prototype and made the first ever video call over a regular analog telephone network. In fact, the concept of video conferencing can be traced to within a few years of Alexander Graham Bell being awarded the patent for the telephone in 1876. Of course, the technology took decades to catch up with the idea, and it's fair to say that the 1950s version of video conferencing still left much to be desired in terms of usability and availability. But think of what else was going on in 1956. The world's first enclosed climate-controlled shopping mall opened in Minnesota. And while almost all homes in the US were connected to the electricity grid and had fridges, only 32% had domestic washing machines. That year, the VCR was invented, and the first hard disks went into use. Also in 1956, fiber optic communications were first devised. In most cases, adoption followed a familiar S-curve. Slow adoption initially, led by the early adopters, followed by very rapid non-linear growth to achieve market saturation. So the steep curves imply a far faster adoption of new technologies, and we can see that if we just look at some of the information technologies and communication technologies involved. But in spite of all of the technology that has changed over the last 6 decades, I think it's fair to say that if we were to time travel back to 1956, we would probably find the social differences to our own time to be a far more difficult barrier to feeling at ease than the technology would be. So in the 1950s, women were supposed to marry and remain at home, where they cooked and cleaned and raised the children while their husbands worked. Birth control pills were developed in the 50s, but only became widely available in the 1960s. In the 1950s, the South African government was rapidly enacting apartheid laws, and in response, the Freedom Charter, which launched in 1956. The point of this little history lesson is that while the development of technology and society are very closely interlinked, there are often long lead times before technologies are adopted and become mainstream, or the effects of those technologies on society become apparent. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen technologies that have been widely available for many years, such as video conferencing, come to the fore. The speed and relative ease with which companies were able to get their office staff working from home has been very telling. It's natural for us to focus on the difficulties of working from home. But in an energy and resource-constrained world, do we really need all of those people to be commuting and occupying office space every day? Of course not. What's been holding us back for all of these years? It obviously wasn't the technology. It was rather our ability to manage the organization change that has lagged. On the other hand, we're struggling to get to grips with the impact of our ever more connected world on human relationships, mental well-being, and society at large. I mean, how many times have you gone to a restaurant and seen this picture? It's quite common that I'll go out and I'll see a family group sitting at a table and everybody with their noses and their cell phones. So industries that rely on engineers of various disciplines for their core operations, whether it's petrochemicals or manufacturing, mining, they tend to attract people who are passionate about technology. And we have a tendency to prioritize technology ahead of processes and people. While the technology may be implemented rapidly, the inability of human beings to adapt to new technologies becomes a barrier to success, and in some cases leads to project failure. In over 2 decades of my experience in implementing and supporting technology solutions in heavy industry, it's been my repeated experience that addressing company culture and behavioral change is by far and away the biggest predictor of technology project success. The difficulties manifest in predictable ways. So the boss doesn't show visible interest in the project, so nobody bothers to go through the trouble of learning something new. Or the project team focuses on excellence in the technical execution of a project, but fails to engage with the end users early enough in the process to understand what their real needs are and to make sure that the project actually addresses these. Even if time and effort is put into a formal communication plan, these tend to be modeled along the lines of a propaganda campaign, with all of the information being broadcast out, but precious few opportunities for meaningful dialogue. So what are you getting back from all of your communication? And probably, one of the most insidious elements that I've encountered is when projects get hijacked by individuals or factions within an organization, and the project is turned into a proxy battleground for other more wide-reaching issues. So I'll never forget the occasion early in my career when I was a very green consultant attempting to deliver a training session, only to find that I'd stumbled into a major labor dispute that was going on site, seemingly nothing to do with my project. But for the people who were present, it was a far more pressing issue than anything that I had to say. So I'm sure that everybody online in this webinar could continue to add to this list. My point is that regardless of how rapidly technology advances, it's the intersection of technology, processes, and people that will continue to demand our close attention. And a fantastic example of this is the maintenance shutdown. In order to remain competitive, the scale and sophistication and complexity of our process plants continues to grow. The demand to extract acceptable investor returns from massive capital investments is immense, and inevitably it gets focused on reducing downtime. We therefore have ever more pressure on ensuring that maintenance shutdowns are performed rapidly and safely and effectively. This starts with making sure that everybody involved is properly trained, competent, and authorized for the role that they are performing. Of course, this also means that we need to have assurance that our contract partner companies are accredited and meeting our governance standards. We then need to provide tools to these people to help them to be more effective under pressure. We need to guide them through the process of correctly identifying hazards in complex plant, to take a systematic approach to sometimes quite intricate maintenance procedures. And we need to be absolutely certain that all energy sources have been correctly identified, isolated, and locked out. We also need to provide assistance to those who are planning and supervising multiple work crews with scopes of work that overlap in time and space. Of course, this needs to factor in how information is exchanged at shift handover and how we deal with changing scopes of work due to emergent issues, and how plant can be safely tested and recommissioned once the job is complete. So we believe that technology has a crucial role to play in orchestrating these processes and providing an integrated, safe system of work for our people. The underlying technologies required are mature and widely available, but as William Gibson reminds us, they're not evenly distributed. Our projects in the Canadian and Australian mining and metals processing operations over the last several years have seen customers rapidly adopting mobile technologies to augment the permit to work and energy isolation processes in the field. Work crews are signing on and off permits using mobile card scanners that are paired to smartphones or to tablets, and checking that all workers are indeed competent and authorized for the work that they're going to be performing. Isolation points are identified and confirmed with RFID tags or with QR codes. Where connectivity is still a constraint, we are able to transition to an offline mode on mobile devices while still maintaining the overall integrity of that process. Mining and processing of natural resources is essential to improving the living conditions of nearly 8 billion people who inhabit the planet. The transition away from fossil fuel energy sources is going to demand an increased use of metals like copper, manganese, the PGMs, nickel, lithium, cobalt. So if the human species is to continue to thrive, our dependency on these and other metals can only grow. But if increased access to these commodities is not optional, the way in which we conduct this business is up to us. Either we remain in a reactive state, perpetually failing to meet the shifting expectations of employees, governments, and the communities in which we operate, or we can choose to take a leading role in doing the right thing on environmental, safety, and social issues. At the recent Financial Times Commodities Mining Summit, Mark Henry, who's the CEO of BHP, compared the relative stock valuations of mining companies with industrial stocks, pointing out that if the miners were rated in the same way as the industrials, they would be worth twice what they are now. So we're talking about a sector with enormous potential to deliver untapped value. But this cannot be achieved by applying our current standards and modes of operation. It means leveraging technological innovation, allowing our people to fulfill their potential in coming up with creative solutions, and engaging with our communities in a transparent manner in order to build trust. So I would like to leave you with just 3 key takeaways. Firstly, the pace of change in the world means that how we manage the interface between people and technology has never been more important. Secondly, it's critical that our goals and values are fully aligned. Will the technology you choose to implement advance or hinder the organizational culture? Is everybody clear about why we are undertaking this project? Finally, unless we choose to lead in safety performance, to be responsible custodians of the environment and to earn the trust of our communities, mining will still continue. But somebody else will be doing it somewhere else, and we will have missed our opportunity. Thank you very much, Dilly.
Thank you, Scott, for an excellent guideline in terms of the intersection between people, culture, and technology. Caroline, before we move on to our keynote speaker, I believe we've got a poll.
That's correct, Dilly. If everyone could please have a look on the right-hand side, there should be a red dot next to your poll button. If we could ask you please to have a quick look through, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. If you could please get your answers in as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you, Dilly.
Okay, we've got the poll results. Good. Okay, so our keynote speaker this morning is an existing customer of Rifle Shot Performance Holdings and Adapt IT for several years. It is our great pleasure to introduce this morning Percy French. Percy, by way of background, is an electrical engineer. He's been in the mining sector for almost 35 years. He's the automation manager of Sibaya Stillwaters, in fact, with Lonman before it was purchased by Sibaya Stillwaters, based at the platinum process plant in Marikana. Percy has also been a champion many years ago of identifying there was a need for moving from a manual paper-based permit-to-work system to an electronic digital permit-to-work system. And Percy will share with you the real-life experiences of moving from a paper-based system to a digital manual system and the benefits of that. In his personal time, Percy is also a marathon runner. For those of you that have run marathons, I have run 2 marathons in particular that Percy has run, which is called the Comrades Marathon in South Africa. It's 90 kilometers, and I was only able to do it twice. Percy has achieved what is called his green number, which is 10 marathons. And his goal is to get to a double green, which is 20 marathons. I take my hat off to Percy because having run many marathons around the world and being a martial artist myself, it is really tough and it shows determination. With that, Percy, I would like to welcome you.
Good morning and thanks, Dilly, for the perfect presentation. Scott, to you as well. Yeah, as part of our operational team in the real life, in the metal and mining and extractive environment, I'm going to present to you today the benefits that this permit system has brought to us in our smelter operation. And ever since we've implemented there, it basically exploded through various other parts of the operation. I think what makes this system so beneficial, it is not only that it had a great influence on our operation, but also the individuals that worked with it. Being passionate to develop and improve processes, this system provided the benefit that both our operational business as well as our systems became cheaper and accepted by our various safety departments and regulatory bodies. I think this is one of the personal satisfactions that I've taken from implementing new systems in our areas of operation. So I'm going to give you the benefits today of what we have realized in the smelter operation as such. And as I've said already, we've implemented on various other operations within the Sibaya Stillwater Platinum Division. And as we speak, it is high on the agenda to start rolling it out to other parts of the operation. So why did this came to us? Why electronic permit system? So what we have found with continuous regulatory audits, stoppages that we have had, we could not further process our metals in process. And after a serious incident where we had fatalities and multiple injuries in one of our sister operations, we as the management of the smelter felt that we need to implement something that can basically make us more efficient and effective. And I started to look around for a system like this, and eventually we have evaluated the adapt IT and rifle shot presentations that was given to us at the time. So our basic requirements was that we want a system that can manage our risk, that can improve our efficiency of our people, have a very simple and reliable system. It must be an auditable system that is accepted by all regulatory bodies, internal and external. And then finally, it must be a cost-effective system. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the key areas that I've highlighted in my opening, and I'm going to give you some graphical presentations of what the system looked like so that you can get the feel for it. So in terms of managing the risk, the system provides us with a configurable risk identification system that we can pre-configure for specific areas, specific tasks. It also assists us to not having people becoming factory blind, just ticking up the risks that they see. The system is configured in such a way that it's not stereotypical. It will basically change the questions in the precautionary and preventative risk management area, so that a permit requester can have to look and think as he goes through the system. Further to managing the risk, it's also preloaded with all the required PPE for a specific task, so it is prescriptive in a certain way, but it also allows the artisan or the permit requester or the contractor that he can make his own selection based on the requirements that he has. When it comes to further managing the risk, it also provides more information around the PPE requirements, especially where we've got fatal risk protocols in place where we manage the risk in a specific manner. In addition to that, it gives you a complete insight of who is working where and an informative description for the relevant team members working with one specific artisan on who is working in the specific area, what type of PPE is required, and what is all the questions and answers that you've agreed to that you will adhere to at any specific time during the job at hand. In addition to this, it's a great communication tool between artisans and permit issuers, as well as to the management of the various working teams. It not only provides you with information on who is still working in which areas and what is active, it also gives you guidance that a specific task is now overdue. And there might be a reason for that, which could be safety related, or it can be due to the difficulty or the grade of difficulty of the task at hand. It also provides communication in the sense that in shift handovers, as Scott has indicated, from one operational team to the other operational team, that it is a one-glance vision. Persons can see when they take over shift where artisans and people is still working. as well as for the management of the artisans. They, as I've said previously, they can also see where their various artisans is still active in the various parts of the operation. In the efficiency portion that I also want to highlight, in the past we would have had significant amount of contractors and artisans waiting in a queue to complete a specific job because there was only one permit type of book available. What makes this system so enhancing in that matter is that an artisan or a permit requester can build his or prepare his permit 2 to 3 days in advance. And when it comes to the approver, after they have done the risk analysis of the specific task, they can very quickly get approval and move on to the job. So in this way, we've increased the utilization of not only our permit issuers, but also our permit requesters. In addition to that, it highlights the various risks, as I've said, so people can beforehand get their tools and equipment ready in order to go to a specific job. It's a very simple but reliable system. You basically just move or install the system by emailing the various URL extensions from one computer to the other. Our operational teams have basically taught themselves how the whole system works. They install it themselves if they've got new employees coming onto the operation, and the system basically guides them by means of the process flow through the various steps of the permit. In terms of reliability, I can honestly say I have hardly had 2 failures in the past where the system became unavailable, where we had to go to revert back to the book system. It has been accepted so much so in the operation that there is just no other way of working but with the permit system as it is. The next thing is it's a very reliable and open data source. It integrates very quickly to any ERP and other business systems. It is biometrics enabled, so in terms of having authentication and security in place, that only the correct persons is working on the correct areas. It is very simple to get this integration done into your system. You will see in the next slide, it is also utilized to improve further efficiency, where we could basically connect this to our SAP ERP, SAP maintenance module, and it will automatically populate the various sectional information on the permit, making it also much quicker for the artisans to move on to the next job. In addition to this, it's a very reliable open data source. You can have various reports that you can export, import for auditable purposes, and the duration that you keep the records is up to you. You can make a decision based on your regulatory requirements or by means of your preference, how long you want to keep records. Okay. It's in terms of auditability, it provides you the information required because it's time date stamped. You can always go back and evaluate the quality of the information that was added to the permits, and based on that you can also update your training programs in order to inform your operational teams on how to improve and look at safety risks and other requirements in advance. Furthermore, you've got a record of exactly each action that was taken on the permit, who did it, what was the reason for that they did it, because the system is open so much so that you can put comments on, and further advance your communication from handing over from one artisan to another, or from one process operational shift to the next. What I want to show you here, just between the two slides, the difference between a permit that is still not approved, indicated by this is a controlled copy, and the next one which is approved with the relevant approval statuses and people that did the approvals on record on the site. So if you need to do an on-site audit, you can physically just go to the permit system, go and check if the whole system the whole process flow was completed, and based on that, you can evaluate compliance to the internal procedures. So in conclusion, we have got what we wanted. We required something that can give us total control of our risk. That is an auditable system where we can basically go and track what happened, where, when, based on the accidents and incidents that we have had. And we can go as far as back as ancient history to go and evaluate our permit requirements. So I think in conclusion, we've got a paperless system now that is not only cost effective, but also have got a huge impact on the individuals, because they've got a reliable system that they can at any stage utilize in their need to increase their efficiency, control their own personal risk, as well as the organizational risk. I think the impact on the environment is that we had books that was within a week completed 100 pages, and that went to archives, now is totally in a computer system where we can find it at any time. Thank you very much. I hope this was learningful.
Thank you, Percy, for sharing with us your journey and Stillwater's journey from a manual system to an electronic permit-to-work system. For the attendees, there's a question and answer button. So towards the end of our presentations, we will take your questions and give you the answers towards the end of the session. We're going to move over to our final speaker for this morning. It is my pleasure to introduce Guy Imbert. Guy is the co-founder of Rifle Shot Performance Holdings. He is currently the CFO and COO. Guy is a CA, a chartered accountant by training, but he's had a passion for governance and operational systems, and he's been involved in the manufacturing, industrial, and mining sector for many years. Guy is going to be sharing with you where Percy has actually showed you the benefits from an implementation, but Guy is going to talk and share with you some guidelines from a program project management and implementation perspective. From a personal perspective, Guy is a very keen cyclist, and he's also a scoutmaster, teaching the youngsters leadership qualities and survival skills. So with that, I hand you over to Guy.
Sorry, Guy, we can't hear you.
Guides delay, you need to unmute your button on the top. There's a microphone button on the top. You need to unmute it. We still can't hear you, Guy.
Can you hear anything now?
Yes, we can, Guy.
Okay, I have no idea what's happened to this microphone. Beg your pardon. Okay, to go back to the beginning, as Percy explained, the benefits of implementing a program such as IntelliPermit are many, and they're valuable. What we have to do then is to make the decision to go ahead with the project and implement it. Of course, that's a piece of cake. All we have to do is manage the trifecta of quality, time, and cost. We then throw in a dose of risk management and communicate as though the project depends on it. Because it does depend on it. But the constraints imposed by the disaster manager legislation in response to COVID have caused many businesses to rethink the way that they do business. And implementing projects is just one of those practices and processes that can do from a tremendous amount of rethinking. So, for example, in the past, we would have spent at least 80% of project time for an IntelliPermit project actually on site. We're currently implementing projects where we've never been on site. And that has required quite a different change of mind. And what strikes me is a big question of why didn't we think of this before? Frankly, I guess we hadn't really thought about it. Even though in places like India, they've made massive businesses out of remote work. It's only under the duress of COVID that we've discovered that our expectation that customers wouldn't handle it or didn't like it to be done that way was actually not valid. As Scott intimated earlier on, we found that if we think slightly differently and we use the tools at our command, remote work is surprisingly practical and efficient. And if you do it right, you can actually cut down on the cost of the implementation. So, having gone by that, how do we go about running an implementation in such a way that we improve the likelihood of it succeeding in terms of all three elements of the trifecta? In other words, quality, time, and cost. And ultimately being a powerful tool for the customer. We think it's about a couple of things, primarily risk and communication. So you need to apply all of the standard project management tools and focus on de-risking the project as far as possible and making certain that communication is powerfully put through. If we move along, our first step is to take a look at the scope of the project, where we work with the customer to dig deep into their requirements, understand exactly what it is they want, develop a project approach, and all the other standard factors in PMBOK type project management. However, in order to make this work better, we prefer to go the route of implementing a relatively light scenario, embed that in the customer's organization, and then refine the requirements and add the bells and whistles. In the case of IntelliPermit, maybe you want to have biometrics, so that instead of putting in a PIN number, your user can use his thumbprint. In that way, he can't hand his PIN number around and he can't share thumbs. So it improves security, it makes things quicker. But recognize that that is a nice to have. Rather get the things you really need in place. As part of that scoping, also identify who is going to be busy on the project. What level of person have you got? Remember that if you want a really good outcome, it depends totally on having good, knowledgeable people involved in the project. Applying your second tier to a project will give you a second-rate answer. Okay, we found also that it's critical to have a proper project governance outline and a proper escalation channel in case things go wrong, or if there are matters of strategy which the project management team are unable to handle. So escalation to the top level of the business is critical. And within the project charter, that is defined along with the key roles and responsibilities and the key actions that are necessary from each of those people. Tying down project charter, we add in here timelines and a project plan are also fundamental. And here's an item that both Scott and Percy referred to, change management. We've heard of some very arbitrary change management, which is highly efficient, but it's not socially acceptable. You cannot go and say to people, guys, this is a system you're going to work on, and if you don't want to learn how to use it, go and try some. I'll arrange a transfer for you. That doesn't work these days. You need to win their hearts and minds and walk them right through the project. So change management, proper communication to all stakeholders is critical right from the word go. Another aspect where we found big problems is with data. Invariably, every customer will tell you, our data is fine, it's perfect. Yet when you dig into it and you start really interrogating it, you'll discover that it is incomplete and inaccurate. When I say incomplete, there are fields that you will need in your new system which do not appear in your old system. So you have to work out a plan of how you're going to generate that data, whether you're going to backfill it or whether you're just going to manage it going into the future. Time for creating and capture of data is invariably one of the items that is most incorrectly calculated. I like to estimate a worst possible scenario for collection of data and typically double or triple it. So data is something that we start collecting right at the beginning of an interaction. At around about the same time, we start looking at the hardware and infrastructure, make certain that the necessary servers, networks are in place, that we as providers are able to access all of the customers' kit and able to do the integration and configuration as required. We ask the customers also to start looking at which printers and computers are needed, start sourcing those, put them into place. Particularly with the current situation, we're finding that hardware takes an incredibly long time to be delivered. We have computers currently which were ordered in May, promised for delivery in August, and they arrived on site last week. Not happy with that. But for the time being, that's what it is, and we need to plan and work with it. Key to getting a good product also is testing your configuration and making certain that it works according to plan. Define the testing scenarios and the outcomes that you expect, and have a variety of customer staff work on that and identify, check the work that they're bringing out, make certain that all scenarios have been covered as expected. Training is an area that has changed more than we think. Sure, we say, okay, so we can deliver training over the internet. We've got Teams, we've got whatever other tool it is. That's simple. Oh, of course, we've got the PowerPoint slides, so let's go. Unfortunately, training is not like that. You've got to maintain people's interest right through the exercise. And if you don't have some form of interaction with them, invariably they zone out. We found that having a warm breathing body acting as a facilitator works very well. So in other words, you have a trainer, a remote trainer, teaching and broadcasting into a training room, and we have in there a facilitator who maintains that level of interest by the users or trainees. It seems to work incredibly well, and you can train multiple training rooms at the same time in that fashion. And last but not least, Dilly very kindly talked about governance. Yes, it is a passion, and it is something that is absolutely critical on a project. It's important that your steercom has regular meetings, that the steercom considers all the aspects of the project that are not going according to plan and addresses those. Also, the COVID factor has provided us with moving targets over the past 7 months. And much as one would like to think it's pretty much over, the reality is we've got quite a lot of time to still work with this. And we're going to be somewhat restricted in our activities. Yeah. So we could carry on for quite a while highlighting project matters, but in the interest of time, and we have a look and we successfully implement projects in the current climate by focusing heavily on widely known project management principles, but with an extra emphasis on communication, both within the project team and also with the wider stakeholder audience, and making certain that everybody is aligned as you move forward and you approach go live and the ultimate test. Billy, with that, it's back to you.
Thank you, Guy, for sharing your many years of experience in managing very large projects. One of the largest projects that Guy has been involved is Eskom, which is the largest electricity supply organization in South Africa, with installations from the nuclear power station to every power station around the country. This is amongst all the many mining companies that Guy has been involved with. Caroline, we're now going to run another poll before we move to Q&A.
Thank you, Dilly. The polls have been completed. You can go straight to Q&A. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, Caroline, we've touched on Scott talking about technology movements over the last several years from the 50s to where we are now, and the need for culture creation and the integration within the organization. Percy gave us a very good, real example of what's going on from an operational perspective in terms of moving from a manual paper-based system and the benefits of an electronic permit-based system. And Guy shared with us some of the guidelines around program and project management. So with that, let's move into Q&A, Caroline.
Thank you. Okay, our first question was, how successful is mobility usage? I would imagine, Ren, did you mean the adoption of mobility usage? And that question is for Percy.
Okay.
Okay, so we are just basically entering the mobility environment currently within our operations. So what we've done is we've not utilized the latest version, which makes it physically a mobile device. We've just basically used our mobile devices to monitor the previous version of the permits. But up until now, we are endeavoring and venturing into the implementation of the full mobile application within the system. We've only upgraded approximately 2 months ago. So it is now on our next venture to start with a full application mobility implementation.
Scott, do you want to add on anything on mobility?
Yes, Dilly, thanks. I just think, just to add to what Percy is saying, and based on our experience elsewhere, what we've found is that the availability of connectivity is often a real constraint when it comes to mining operations. And for that reason, the ability of the application to work in an offline manner is absolutely critical. So I think that it's something that needs to be very carefully thought through when you think about the process and about how the system is supporting decision making in the field. So to give you an example of that, we apply various types of business rules to that process. Some of those business rules are internal to that permit itself. So something like making sure that the person who issued the permit isn't the same person who accepted the permit. And that's something that, you can test that rule when you're offline. However, there are many other rules and checks that you can implement that look at the dependency between jobs. And if you're offline, you cannot test those. So an example being, if we want to have a person exclusively signed on to one permit, there's no way to be able to test that if you're working in an offline manner. So I think that, again, it comes down to making sure that we are very clear in our messaging to the end user. So in that instance, we will alert them to the fact that these are the particular rules that we would usually check if we were online, but we're not able to check those electronically, but the onus is then on that person to perform those checks for themselves. So I think that mobility really is an exciting area. A significant portion of our product development budget these days is dedicated to mobile solutions, whether it's the core permit to work or risk assessment, the risk assessment side of the process. But it's important to pay attention to some of those details.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott.
Next question is, how would the unions view the mines implementing an electronic permit to work?
So I'll make a general comment, and I would like Percy to chat. So I think safety is of paramount importance, as you know. And I think with the advent of COVID and the prerequisites, the regulatory environment, etc., and the integration before you issue a permit, it's really a benefit, I would say, because having it electronically, you cannot change anything, as in a manual system, which is more prone to manual intervention and abuse. With that, Percy, do you want to add on anything?
Yes, I must say, as I started in my opening point, we as management of the smelter complex at the stage when we endeavored to implement this had a consultation session with our tripartite stakeholders. And the moment that we indicated to them that it is more of an individual, meaning the persons doing the work also benefit and what benefit it will have with them, they've adopted it with open hands. We have not had any pushback from neither the unions nor our internal safety departments or our regulatory bodies when we started to implement the system. In actual fact, they accepted it and adopted it very, very quickly.
Thanks, Percy.
Dilly, we're a little over time. Can we answer one more question before we go?
We'll take a last question. Yeah.
Okay. Just typically, how long would it take for an implementation?
Guy, Scott, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think it depends very much on the scope of the project, but there are certain elements which are very similar across multiple customers. Those would be some of the technical aspects of implementation. But if you consider the size of the workforce that requires training, that would certainly have an impact on the duration of an implementation project, and also the degree to which it's phased and how it's organized. But we've run projects from anything from 7 weeks to over a year. It really does depend very much on the scope. I would say that key determinants are the number of people that require training, the number of assets that fall under that implementation. So we've done many implementations where there are multiple different sites that need to access one system, and getting all of those people aligned and literally on the same page as far as the permits to work and the standards required. That can take a lot of time. And the other element that can consume time is where there is integration with third-party systems. So all of those, I would say that those are the key factors that determine implementation time.
Thanks, Scott. So with that, we've come to the end of our session. We'd like to start off by thanking the Rifle Shot team, marketing team, headed up by Caroline. who's done a great job with all the webinars we've had. This is the first in the series in the mining sector, starting with safety. Our next session will be focused on what we call the Zen of mining, which is the flow within the operations of mining, including optimization of your supply value chain. So we'll be touching on that, and we'll have a very interesting lineup of speakers for that. So watch out for the invites on that. This will also be sent to you. It'll be recorded and sent to you, but also look out at the Rifle Shot YouTube channel for some of the previous webinars. So with that, we'd finally like to thank you for making the time and attending our presentation this morning. Bye-bye.